Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving into a concept that might just rock your world a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I think this one's going to be a good one.
We're talking about the idea of non-self, straight from Buddhist philosophy.
Non-self, huh? Sounds deep.
It is. We've got a podcast episode we're going to be pulling from.
Okay.
It's called Anatta, which is actually the word for non-self, and it features a guest who's a real expert in Buddhist thought.
Awesome. I'm intrigued already. So what's this whole non-self thing about? Like, are we saying we don't exist?
Haha, not exactly.
Yeah.
But it does challenge this idea that we all have, that there's this solid me inside, this fixed self that's always there.
Right. Like, I'm me and you're you.
Exactly. But what if that's not the whole story?
Hmm.
So right off the bat, the guest in this episode, he uses this really clever thought experiment. I love this.
Okay, lay it on me.
He asks, is your hand part of your body?
Well, yeah, of course.
Easy, right? We'd all say yes. Okay, but then he throws a curveball. He's like, is the air you breathe part of your body?
Ooh, that's interesting. I mean, most people would probably say no, right?
Exactly. But here's the thing. We can live without a hand, but we can't live without air.
Wow, yeah, that's true. So air is kind of more essential to our existence than some parts of our body.
Exactly. So maybe the air we breathe is even more a part of it than our hand. It really flips the script on how we define what's me and what's not.
I'm starting to see where this is going. So this air example, it's not just about whether air is literally part of us, right? It's pointing to something deeper.
You got it. This is where that non-self or anatta concept comes in.
Okay, so help me connect the dots here.
So the idea is this example, it shows that maybe the boundary between self and not self, it's not as clear-cut as we think.
Yeah, I'm starting to get that. It's not about denying our individuality, right? But maybe about recognizing that things are a bit more fluid than we usually assume.
That's a great way to put it. So it's not about saying I don't exist, but questioning what we even mean by I in the first place.
Okay, I'm with you. So if this solid me isn't the whole picture, what's the Buddhist view on what self actually is?
Well, Buddhism talks about these 5 aggregates, or skandhas, basically, the components that make up what we think of as self.
5 aggregates. I'm all ears. Break that down for me.
Okay, so first up is form. That's the easy one. It's our physical body, everything we can touch and see.
Gotcha. So like our arms, legs, organs, all that good stuff.
Yep, exactly. Next are sensations, like all of the stuff we experience through our senses.
Okay, so sights, sounds, smells, tastes, textures, all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Then there are perceptions, which is how we interpret those sensations, how we make sense of them.
So like seeing a red apple and recognizing it as an apple.
Right. Then we get to the big one, mental formations. This is all the mental stuff, thoughts, emotions, beliefs, opinions, even our habits. It's everything that makes our inner world.
Wow, yeah, that covers a lot of ground. So it's not just what we think, but how we think and all those underlying tendencies.
Exactly. And finally, there's consciousness itself, that awareness that ties it all together.
Oh, interesting. So consciousness is like the container for all those other aggregates.
Kind of. It's more like it's woven into everything. So what we experience as this solid me is really this dynamic interplay of all these constantly changing elements. It's more like a process than a fixed thing.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild thought. It's like we're not a noun, but a verb,
Wow.
always in motion.
I love that. So you're getting it. It's about recognizing that impermanent, interconnected flow of experience. That's what Anatta is pointing to.
Okay, I think I'm starting to wrap my head around this, but the guest in the episode, he goes even further, right? He uses another analogy to illustrate this non-self idea, something about time, right?
Oh, yes. This is a good one. He asks us to imagine waking up in the middle of nowhere. No phone, no calendar, nothing. And he asks, could you just know it was Tuesday?
I mean, no way. How could I? Tuesday is just a name we gave a day.
Right. And his point is that just like Tuesday is a concept we created to make sense of time, the idea of a solid, independent me is also kind of a concept. It's useful, but not necessarily the ultimate truth.
Hold on, so you're saying my whole sense of self, who I think I am, is kind of like made up as a day of the week.
Not made up in the sense of being fake or imaginary,
Okay, good.
but it's definitely constructed. Like it's a way we organize our experience, but not necessarily the absolute truth of reality.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. So if self is more of a convenient fiction, how does that change how I live my life? That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is. But before we go there, I think we should probably unpack what this means for how we see ourselves and how we relate to the world around us. Does that sound good?
Absolutely. I'm hooked. Let's keep going. Okay, so where were we? Oh, yeah, we were talking about how this idea of a fixed self is, well, maybe not the whole picture, more like a useful tool than an absolute truth.
Yeah, exactly. Like a map that helps us navigate, but not the actual terrain.
Right. And what's really interesting is that when we start to see through that illusion of a solid self, it can have a big impact on our lives, especially in our relationships.
Ooh, okay. I'm always up for improving my relationships. Tell me more. How does seeing self as more fluid change how we relate to other people?
Well, think about it this way. When we're holding on super tight to this idea of being a separate, independent self, it's easy to get caught up in judgments and blame. We see other people as separate from us, and that separation, it can lead to conflict.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like we put up walls between ourselves and others and then wonder why we feel so disconnected.
That's a great way to put it. But when we start to see that interconnectedness, those walls start to crumble. We begin to realize that the other is not so different from ourselves after all.
Yeah, their joy becomes our joy. Their pain becomes our pain. It's like shifting from a me versus them mentality to a we're all in this together kind of feeling.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can be incredibly powerful, especially when it comes to navigating disagreements or conflicts.
Ooh, okay. Give me an example.
So imagine you're in an argument with someone. If you're stuck on your own perspective, on your side of the story, it's easy to get defensive.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. We get so attached to being right that we forget to actually listen.
Right. But when you understand Anatta, when you see that your perspective is just one small piece of the puzzle, you can approach the situation differently.
Okay, I'm listening. So how do we do that?
It starts by recognizing that your viewpoint is just that your viewpoint, not the absolute truth.
It's not about denying our individual experience, right? But about seeing it in a larger context.
Exactly. It becomes less about winning or losing and more about understanding.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's about
Yeah.
really listening to the other person, trying to see things from their side, even if you disagree.
Right. It's about opening up the possibility for real connection and resolution.
I love that. It's almost like non-self gives us a whole new set of tools for those tricky relationship moments.
It really does. And it's not just about resolving conflicts either. Understanding non-self can also enhance all the good stuff in our relationships. Those moments of joy, celebration, shared experiences, they become even richer.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me, how does seeing through the illusion of self affect our experience of joy and connection?
Well, when we're clinging to that fixed sense of self, we tend to experience joy as something contained within us, separate from others. But when we recognize that interconnectedness, our joy can actually expand. It becomes shared joy.
Okay, yeah, I was starting to see what you mean. It's like instead of just feeling happy for someone, we actually feel their happiness as if it's part of our own experience.
That's a great way to put it. It's like our capacity for love and happiness grows when we see ourselves as part of something bigger. Our hearts become bigger in a way.
It's so beautiful. And, it makes me think about something else the guest in the episode mentioned. He said that this whole idea of non-self, it can help us break free from suffering.
Oh, absolutely. This is a key part of Buddhist teaching.
Okay, I need you to break this down for me. How does understanding non-self lead to less suffering?
Well, Buddhism teaches that a lot of our suffering comes from clinging to things, to people, to ideas, even to our own sense of self. We want things to stay the same, when in reality, everything is always changing.
It's like resisting the flow of life, right? We get attached to things being a certain way, and then when they inevitably change, we suffer.
Exactly. And that's where non-self comes in. When we understand that everything, including our sense of self, is impermanent, we can loosen our grip on that clinging.
So it's about learning to accept change, to let go.
Exactly. When we see that everything is in flux, we can start to accept change with more grace and ease. We can allow ourselves to experience the full range of human emotions: joy, sorrow, excitement, grief, without getting so caught up in them.
That sounds incredibly freeing, but also really challenging. How do we actually cultivate this sense of non-attachment in our everyday lives? Like, where do we even begin? Okay, so much to unpack here. We've been talking about non-self and how it can help us let go of that clinging and find more peace with all the change in life.
Right.
But I got to be honest, this is pretty mind-bending stuff. Do you have any practical tips for how we can actually use this in our daily lives?
Totally. One of the most powerful practices is mindfulness. Have you ever tried mindfulness meditation?
I've dabbled, but I'm not like a super regular meditator or anything.
Well, mindfulness is all about paying attention to what's happening right now, to your thoughts, feelings, and sensations, all without judgment.
So like just noticing them without getting swept away.
Exactly. It's not about suppressing your thoughts and emotions, but giving yourself space from them.
Right.
And the more we practice this, the more we start to see just how fleeting they are.
Okay, yeah. They come and go, just like everything else. It's like mindfulness can help us detach from those stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't have to be formal meditation either. You can bring mindfulness to anything you're doing, like eating, walking, working, even just talking to someone.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So it's about being present in each moment.
Right. Okay, so mindfulness is one path. What else can help us integrate this whole non-self thing?
Yeah. What else get us?
Another powerful practice is cultivating kindness and compassion. When we focus on helping others, when we reach out with love and understanding, we directly experience that interconnectedness we've been talking about.
Oh, I get it. It's like those acts of kindness remind us that we're all connected, that we're not just these isolated individuals.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be some big, grand gesture either. Just small things like a genuine compliment or holding the door for someone or just really listening when a friend's having a tough time.
It's like those small acts ripple outwards, affecting not only the people around us, but also our own sense of self.
Right. It all comes back around. This whole exploration of non-self, it's really about realizing our shared humanity and that interconnectedness. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we relate to everything.
A choice between holding tight to that illusion of a separate self or embracing that reality of interdependence. This is heavy stuff.
It is. And when we shift our perspective from me to we, everything changes. Relationships become more meaningful, our actions have more purpose, and life just becomes richer and more fulfilling.
Wow. This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. To wrap things up, what's the one thing you really want our listener to walk away with today?
I'd say remember that your sense of self is more fluid than you might think. And recognizing this can open up a whole new way of being in the world, one that's full of compassion, freedom from unnecessary suffering, and a much deeper connection to everything around you.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. And as you go about your day, dear listener, we invite you to ask yourself, if your sense of self is a construct, what are you choosing to include in it? And how might consciously expanding your sense of self change your actions and relationships in the world? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into non-self.
Until next time, keep exploring.